A goal, Quishbilly, Huddersfield Town. The most famous goal of Quishbilly's life.
Is this the moment for Lee Fowler? It is. Take your place in Division 2, Huddersfield Town.
And Steve Simonson's boots now. He's missed. Steve Simonson clears the frame of the goal and collapses in a heap of tears. Huddersfield Town are promoted.
Mustafa Schindler has a chance to write his name in Huddersfield Town legend. And he takes that chance!
Welcome to the Andy Takes That Chance preview show part 2. Following on from our main podcast, we've got a few added extras in this episode from the media world, and in amongst a few announcements for next season. With me, Matt Shaw, is a man who's looking to remain sane and clothed this coming season. It's Brady Frost. Are you okay, mate?
Yeah, whether I will be sane and clothed by the end of the season, we'll have to wait and see, but that's the fun of it, isn't it?
It is indeed. And a man who will probably get naked because he's here to make a new brand impression. It's Josh Phillips. You all right there, Josh?
I'm not promising anything, but yeah, I'm all right. You?
Not bad. You know, we do some wacky and zany things throughout the season, but we usually leave it to Cozzy, so I'm pretty sure you'll be okay. So nothing to worry about here. But nice to see you. For people that don't quite recognise you from this, you do the Talking with Giants, Huddersfield Giants podcast with me as well. You're my co-host, if you like, on there, aren't you? So happy to make the transition across to football.
Probably don't know me from that either, to be honest. But yeah, happy to be here. Happy to talk about town and all that stuff. So, yep.
Right. So I did mention that we'll be making some announcements here. So the first announcement that I have is that I will be stepping down from hosting the preview show. As much fun as it is to do, time isn't always my best friend these days. So going forward, Brady, you will be hosting the show, and Josh, you will be the co-anchor. In practice,
I've been called
something completely different, didn't it? I'll still be jumping in from time to time as a third wheel, but the preview show will be back this coming season, ready to drop around Wednesday, Thursday, Brady, and you've got a couple of new bits and bats ready to rock and roll, haven't you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, let's be honest, Matt, you dropped out halfway through anyway, so we did a lot of hosting. But no, we'll stick you on the good stuff on the main one. So it'll be me and Josh. I noticed you didn't laugh there, so I was saying that in jokey way.
Wasn't funny, to be honest, but yeah.
Well, you know, the truth hurts. But yeah, it's.
I can't believe you. I can't believe you let the hashtag Show Out Brigade win.
Exactly. Yeah.
I know.
Short hashtag sure as a fraud, but the warm-up's going to be a bit stupid like me talking right now, so it's going to be me and Josh. Obviously we'll be previewing the games for the season, but we're going to introduce a few new kind of quizzes and bits for it, just to make it a bit more fun, because let's be honest, watching Huddersfield hasn't been fun. So if we can make people, when they're watching town or listening about town, make it a bit more bearable. That's kind of the plan.
The idea is to make it more of a magazine show rather than a live immersive experience, shall we say. So it'll be very, very fun, and we're obviously looking forward to the games, and where possible you'll also have guests from other clubs as well to offer their side of their opinion as well. So it's going to be fun. So looking forward to listening and tuning in, guys, and obviously I won't be too far away from that. Okay, so I did mention at the start that we do have a number of media personalities, and that's probably the right thing to say. And the first thing that we've got is BBC West Yorkshire Sport head honcho Jonathan Buchan. So I chatted to Jonny about his thoughts on Huddersfield Town for the coming season, and here's what he had to say. Jonny, what did you make of Huddersfield Town last season?
I think last season, it's fair to say that Town had a bit of a season of two halves, didn't they? They had that really good run before Christmas. Everyone got quite excited. They got points on the board. And ultimately, those points on the board at that stage of the season is what saved them, because the second half of the season was pretty dire, wasn't it, from top to bottom? Inconsistent, but you can kind of understand that. They were playing in a new way under a new coach, all those kinds of things. They did lose some key players to injuries as well. But I think overall, many people felt that the performances should have been better. And did the side really get what was asked of them by Carlos Corberán? That's the question. And I think They had a shorter pre-season last season. This season, they've had a much better pre-season. You know, they've had friendly games taking place. They've had time to work together. They had players in early, or as early as they could do, with them all being free transfers at the start of July. So I think that will stand them in good stead. But last season, certainly inconsistent. And certainly quite worrying at times. A couple of big defeats as well, which are never nice to see. So I think that there will be still a few concerns heading into this new season.
And what have you made of those summer transfers? So Huddersfield obviously acted early. They've plugged in the gaps mostly defensively initially. What have you made of the players that have come in?
I think they did well by trying to get players done as soon as they could. So they obviously got 3 signings in, which meant that they could join at the start of July, which means they've had a full pre-season under Carlos Corberán. So I think they were clearly well structured and organised on that front of things. Budget is probably how you could describe some of the signings, you know, with them being free transfers. Yeah, okay, they're probably having to pay out some fees in terms of to the players and representatives and all those kinds of things, and then the wages as well. But I don't think anybody's looked at the signings and been wowed by them. Jordan Rhodes is an interesting one, isn't it? You know, 8 goals, I think it is, in the last 2 seasons that he's scored. He's not the Jordan Rhodes of old that Town fans will remember from those ridiculous scoring seasons that he had. I think that is a bit of a gamble, particularly the length of contract he's been given as well. You know, I know Sheffield Wednesday fans weren't necessarily disappointed to see him leave. I think they've gone and got a couple of younger players in, and they've got a player I quite like in Matty Pearson. I saw him quite a bit in one of my previous roles. Quite like him. He'll put his head in where you probably shouldn't put your head, which is a good thing. I think they need that in this Huddersfield Town side. They need players in this side who, if things aren't going well, can really dig in. They need the hoggies, don't they? You know, if it's not going well, they can dig in, and they can certainly, you know, at least show some character. So I think they've done okay on that front of things. I would now be sat asking, well, who else is going to come this summer, because they need some signings. And the other big question is, who's going to be leaving this summer? You know, there's still some players in this side who you might think will be moving on, particularly Buchan, wouldn't you, as well? And Benza as well. But is anyone going to pay the money that the club wants for them? I think unlikely. So it might be that they end up being at the club for another year, which is another annoyance to many supporters. And then I think that there might be other players that between now and the end of the transfer window, some people come sniffing for. You look at Toffolo, you know, they brought in Ruffles. Could you say they brought in Ruffles to try and cover the fact that Toffolo might leave this window? O'Brien as well. You look at it and say, could he be someone who moves on this window? I wouldn't be surprised if either of them did move on this window, to be honest with you, but that has to happen in some ways sooner rather than later. They either need to know they're definitely staying, or they need to move them on as sooner rather than later so they can reinvest that money. The last thing you want is another window where it's coming down to the final few days and Town don't get signings over the line once again. That can't happen again.
Okay, Jonny, let's get the crystal ball out and give it a good scrub. Mystic Buchan, how do you see the season playing out for Huddersfield Town?
I think it's hard to tell at the minute because of the factors that we've mentioned about who might still sign. You know, they do want a couple more players, and we did hear that what was said to us by Phil Hodgkinson at Radio Leeds, they want a couple of bums off seat players, don't they, to come in. If they get those players, then great. Don't know who those players might be at the minute. I think it's going to be hard to know whether the season will play out well until we see some more movement in the window. Otherwise, you look at the squad they've got. Okay, if you can keep Josh Koroma fit, then you've probably got a few more goals in that side. Have you got more goals in it with Rhodes and Campbell and Ward up there? I'm not too sure, to be honest with you. Have you got enough goals to be in a higher position? Don't know. I think that will come down to Koroma again, anybody else who might sign. I think it could be another season in that bottom echelon, unfortunately. That doesn't mean that you'll be in a relegation battle at the very end of the season, but I think it could certainly be a bottom half season for Huddersfield Town, bottom quarter, possibly. But I think the next month will probably have a big impact on that.
Okay, so we'll have a look at we'll stare into that crystal ball once again, and we'll look more broadly across the championship as well. So we're looking towards the top 6 for the championship. Who are your pick for the top 2? And then maybe pick a 4 for the playoffs and a winner. I'm not letting you get off easily.
Wow. I hate this sort of thing because I hate having to try and put my name to it.
Predict 1 to 24. Well, 1 to 24.
1 to 24. Okay, so we'll start with 24. So I think when you look at the table this year, I think it's actually quite a strong championship this year. I think that those coming down will be straight back in the mix. I think Sheffield United will be in the mix this year in the top 6. You know, they had an awful time last season, didn't they? But they've still got some very good players for this level in particular as well. So I think Sheffield United will be up there. I think we'll also see Bournemouth up there this year. I think you'll see Fulham in the mix once again, even though they're having a change of head coach, of course. I don't think Barnsley will be in the mix again. I think they'll probably lose some key players over this window, and they've certainly lost the manager, haven't they? So I think we'll see a bit of a difference in that one. West Brom will be in the mix up there. So that's 4 of them that I think will be up there. Who else might be? Middlesbrough might be in there, doing a little bit of business in Middlesbrough. The wily old fox with his pre-signed pictures in his bum bag of Neil Warnock. So that'll be an interesting one. So that's 5. Who else do I think might be up there this season? Let me have a think. I think you might have to, for a 6th team, go for someone like a Swansea City. Again, I've had changes, haven't they? But I think they might be up there in that mix. So there's 6 for you. What order those 6 are in, I have no idea, Matt. No idea.
I love Neil Warnock. So
who doesn't?
If you had to pick a dark horse, somebody, so maybe a Huddersfield Town 2017 or a Barnsley last year, who would be the ones that maybe you would see coming up on the rails that no one expects?
I wonder whether Hull City might do okay next year. Coming up, getting promoted, good form. They've got Grant McCann in charge. They seem to have a real unity there as well. Some good individuals in that team. I wonder whether they might bounce and be able to do okay next season. I don't know whether they'll be able to push top end, but I wonder whether they'll be able to do okay in the Championship next season. You never know whether Preston might be able to get themselves going as well. They're one of the teams that, were at one stage notorious at that top end, weren't they? Year after year after year after year, and then seemingly have fallen away somewhat. So you wonder whether they might be able to get their acts together as well. It's difficult to say. Do I think it'll be Huddersfield Town? I don't think it'll be a Huddersfield Town David Wagner situation. I don't think we'll have that, unfortunately, next season. But I think there's a couple there who could do all right if they can string everything together.
And it's the darker side to the predictions. It's the bottom 3. So who do you think's in for a tough time this year?
I think this year Blackpool will be in for a tough time. I think they'll certainly struggle this year. And I know you're going to record all these and throw them back at us, so I'm delighted and looking forward to that at the end of the season. I think Blackpool will struggle. Yeah. I also think Coventry City might struggle, and I think that Luton Town actually might struggle and not be as necessarily resilient as they were at times last season. Derby County obviously will have major problems, and I don't think many people will be too sad to see that either, will they? So I think Derby County will probably be down that bottom end. They could be the ones this year that take a big hit, I think, in the same way we saw Sheffield Wednesday go down to League One last season, one of the so-called bigger clubs. I think we could see Derby County in trouble this year with all the problems that they have going on.
And we'll move back to Town momentarily as well. Who do you think's set for a good season this year? So who would you predict maybe a player of the year for us, and also a breakout player? So somebody who is on the periphery, if you like, who's maybe ready to jump out and take the bull by the horns.
Well, I've already said I like Matty Pearson, so I think Matty Pearson will do quite well in this Huddersfield Town side. And then I think there's a couple of others. It depends when you look at the keepers as well. Who's going to start in goal? Are you going to have Nichols? Are you going to have Schofield? If Schofield starts again, I like Ryan Schofield. I think actually he's a decent goalkeeper. So I think he could have a good season if he's got a decent backline in front of him, if indeed he's given the nod. We're all looking at Josh Koroma and wondering whether he can find that form that he found before he picked up the injury. And if he can, he could certainly have a fantastic season. So I think he's someone that we're all kind of hoping to see do well, hoping to see fire the goals this season, 15, 20 goals this season that could see Huddersfield Town finish higher up the table than where they were last time around. So I think he's somebody, Josh Koroma, who we should certainly be taking a look at for being player of the season nomination already before a ball's even been kicked. In terms of breakthrough, I think Scott High is somebody who, again, we've been quite excited by, haven't we, when we've seen him. Sorba Thomas has looked quite lively, hasn't he, when he's been in this side? And I think he could be sort of that sort of player to learn from some of those other players around him, even learning from someone young like Josh Koroma. He could be an exciting player. He could be a bums off seat player, as Phil Hodgkinson said in the past. But he's got to be given more game time. And again, there's still a window to go. Could we have a key player be someone who hasn't yet joined the football club? I think that's a possibility.
And that's it, Jonny. So next season, we'll be able to find Radio Leeds, Freeview Channel 719. Huddersfield will be bouncing back to FM as well when Leeds United are at a different time. So DAB channels as well. So we're well covered next year, aren't we?
You are, yeah. Many options. Digital radio, every single Huddersfield Town game, but we know there are certain areas of Huddersfield that don't get a very good digital radio signal. If you're in that area, if you're in one of the little troughs or one of the little valleys, Freeview channel 719. If you're a Huddersfield Town fan, you will always get your games on Freeview channel 719. And whenever you're not playing at the same time as Leeds United, you'll be on 92.4 FM across the entirety of West Yorkshire. So all three frequencies. And I can tell you as well, with the way that Leeds United's games get moved, a lot of your games will be on 92.4 FM this season. So yeah, we'd love to hear from you throughout the season. You can text 81333. You can tweet us at BBC WYS as well, or give us a call 0800 389 3333. We really want to speak to you. If you're a Town fan, we really, really do value your opinions. So get in touch with us ahead of the games and after the games as well, and give me a load of stick when all my predictions are wrong.
Cheers, Jonny. Thank you. Okay, thanks to Jonny as always for doing that. And remember, Huddersfield Town will be on BBC FM when Leeds are not playing at the same time this year. So that's good news for Town fans who get a bit of a ropey DAB signal over in the Huddersfield area. Live where we do, Brady. You can get all of them quite easily, can't you? But we won't brag about it. Right, so quite interesting what Jonny had to say there, Josh. He's sort of thinking Huddersfield sort of bottom. You know, it's not too dissimilar to what everyone else says. Huddersfield kind of bottom 8 or so, possibly bottom quarter. Quite fair, I thought, overall.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's hard to argue, isn't it? We don't want to be sat here saying that it's not the most exciting prediction in the world, is it? But you know, you've got to be realistic about these things. And based on last season and you know the recruitment we've done, the recruitment's not been bad by any means, but there's not much to suggest there will be much different from last season. So I think we've got to be realistic and accept that that's a fair prediction.
Okay, so the main podcast this season. So we've listened to a little bit of feedback from you guys, and the aim is going to be to try and get the podcast out earlier on in the week. So we will be moving the day that we do the recording podcast. There's a couple of little bits and bats to iron out there to make sure we have a set time every week, but we're going to try and make it a set time every week and try and get a podcast to you reviewing the weekend's game as early as possible on Monday, so that you have the week to listen to it rather than us throwing it at you on Thursday with, you know, a day in the week left to listen to it. So that's going to be good. Other good news for us is that Magic Rock are just in the process of renewing their sponsorship with us, which is great news for us as well. But just while it's still going through that process at the moment, we probably won't be able to bring the live shows just for now as we were doing at one point. But however, once that's all sorted out and I get a new laptop, not from the sponsorship, but I'm currently in the process of buying myself a new laptop as well, we'll be able to bring live shows in, which will be a lot more fun, and it'll be a lot better. You know, the software that we'll use will be a lot more interactive and far slicker as well. So we're hoping that that will be better than last season, and you'll hear some new voices as well. So Matt Wilson joined us for the first episode of the preview, and hopefully Matt will be able to come in a little bit more next season as well, and we'll be able to push it out on multiple platforms as well, and not just YouTube. And speaking of YouTube, our next media guest is BenHD. Ben is a YouTuber who specializes in the Championship and has over 30,000 subscribers on his YouTube channel. We've got 942, so levels and all that. And here's what Ben had to say. Ben's a Preston fan, and here's what he had to say on Huddersfield Town's chances this season.
I go by BenHD on YouTube. I mostly cover Championship, doing a lot of previews, predictions, that sort of stuff, and all that good thing. It's a good league, the Championship, to really get into, and very much looking forward to next season.
Right, Ben, what did you make of Huddersfield Town last season?
Huddersfield were an interesting team last season, I think is the best way to put it. The first time that I properly got to see you guys was when we played you. I think it was fairly early on into the season. You know, I'd heard a bit up until that point about what Corberan was sort of trying to do with the system and things like that. I think that game we had, especially at your place, probably summed up how your season went, really. The first sort of 20 minutes of that game, I was a little bit taken back. You know, you guys were playing some really nice football, fullbacks were bombing on, things like that. It's quite progressive, playing out from the back, and you took the lead. And I thought, how's this team where they are, you know, struggling in the league? And then there was one moment in that first half, I think we hit the post or something like that, and you could just sense, like, the North End players sort of looked around at each other. Okay, we got a chance to get back into this. When we sort of made it 1-1, we could sense we were going to get that winner and stuff like that. And it was just maybe a bit of a soft underbelly that was there at Huddersfield last season, really. I'm not sure whether that was a case of personnel at the back maybe not being strong enough, maybe a few people being thrown at the deep end. I know you had, a young keeper that was thrown in there last season. And whether that was maybe just a thing about quality or it was a mentality thing. I know you tried to brush up in January, Richard Keogh came in to try and add a bit more experience and things like that. But even the reverse fixture that we had then later on in the season, you still came to Deepdale, even in the situation that you're in, down near the bottom of the Championship. You're still trying to play this really progressive football and you started out well. And then when we took the lead, you still didn't try to shape things up at the back and try and solidify things. You just kept bombing people on going forward. And from then we just seemed to pick you apart and things like that. So, I think that next season will be interesting and a sort of test for Corberan to see how adaptable he is to different scenarios and things like that, because last season was a little bit all over the place. But yeah, it was certainly an interesting ride, wasn't it?
What have you made so far of Huddersfield's summer progress? So there's a number of players have come in during the summer. The idea really was to the main issue with Huddersfield last year was the lack of squad depth. So we had a number of injuries, 7 or 8 injuries a game for a good 4 or 5 months. And we've looked to try and address that by bringing in a couple of extra fullbacks, centre backs, just to solidify that soft area that you identified. So what have you made of Huddersfield's summer window so far?
Yeah, I think that the big thing with you guys was probably improving the squad first and foremost, so that those sort of injury crises and things don't happen and have, so much of an influence going into next season. A couple of fullbacks have come in, a goalkeeper, and defensively especially, it does look a little bit more tighter in those areas. Of those sort of defensive signings, I quite like the addition of Matty Pearson, who's come in. I think he's someone who's probably a little bit different to the personnel you had at the back last season. I know that sort of with the brand of football, it's all about, having people who are good on the ball, being able to play out from the back and things like that. But Matty Pearson, a bit more no nonsense and of that sort of breed. I think when you bed him in with the other players around him, it'll be sort of a welcomed addition. But I think undoubtedly, the squad has got better with those sort of additions. But then the question comes, has the starting 11 got better sort of with the players that have come in and things like that? Jordan Rhodes, I'm sure, is the one that's got a lot of Huddersfield fans talking and things like that. I'm interested to see how that goes. Me being a North End fan, I always, draw back on Preston comparisons to these sort of things. And we sort of had a similar thing, not quite, but similar with David Nugent. He was sort of a bit of a club legend who was coming back after a decade away from the club. And sometimes sentiment can be a little bit of a dangerous thing in football. Is Rhodes going to be that sort of player who's going to be able to, fit into that system and be that pressing man? Or are you going to sort of mould the team around him a little bit? But I think that like a lot of other clubs as well, teams will be more reliant on sort of the free agents market and bringing in loan players. I think that that's not just a Huddersfield thing. I think that's a general thing we'll see with a lot of Championship clubs over this window because of the impact of COVID. And really, apart from those parachute teams, it's not really probably all too much money that's floating about in the league at the moment compared to a couple of years ago. So, I think it was certainly a fast start to the window. And I'm interested to see if you do make any more additions coming forward from here.
How do you see then? So let's get the crystal ball out, give it a good rub down. How do you see this season going for Huddersfield in particular?
It's difficult because I think that Corberan has got things about him that make him, I think he's a good coach. I think that he showed that at times last season. And I think he's a good coach when he's got sort of 11 technically gifted players who are able to execute what he wants to be able to do. Whether he's the right man, that if you guys are going to be dragged into another relegation scrap, is he the right man to sort of drag you out of that, grind out results when necessary and things like that? I'm not so sure. I think the jury's still very much out on that case for that one. I think that, avoiding, maybe an injury crisis or, a big player leaving or something like that, you may just be able to get by. But I think that I'm tempted to say it will be a bit of a struggle.
And in terms of standout players for Huddersfield, is there anybody that you're particularly looking forward to seeing? You've mentioned Matty Pearson, who'll be good at the back, but centre backs aren't always the ones that you pay to watch, are they? But is there anybody that you're thinking that you may be of interest and seeing how they get on this year?
Yeah, I think Josh Koroma, especially, I think that his absence was definitely felt at times last season when he picked up the injury when he did. And then when he returned to the squad, you could see the quality just elevate a level going forward. He is, for his age, probably one of the best in the league already, for me, in that position. I think he's absolutely brilliant. His ability to sort of take on players and his final product as well. I think that he is probably going to be the key for next season. If he picks up an injury or departs or something like that, you could find yourselves in a bit of trouble. But if he is going to be the centerpiece, then I think he may be able to just about get you over the line.
Right, Ben, we'll keep that crystal ball out. So we're looking at more of a broader championship context now. So top 6. So if I can push you for a top 2 and then the 4 that will make up the playoffs, so maybe pick a winner from there.
Okay, well, I've got to throw the disclaimer in there right away that things can change with transfers and stuff like that. But as we speak right now, I think the teams coming down from the Premier League will be very strong. It's a little bit of a boring answer, but the 2 right now that I'm probably fancying in terms of the top 2 are probably West Brom and Fulham. I think that they're coming down with a lot of firepower from the Premier League. Sheffield United, I also think, will be strong. And going into that top 6 prediction, I probably have Sheffield United sniffing around in there as well. Bournemouth, you'd expect to be strong after last season. I know that maybe a few more, departures are expected from there. Danjuma's constantly being linked away, but Scott Parker's got a philosophy there that seemed to work for him at Fulham, which he'll look to implement there. And then after those 4 teams, the rest of it's very much up for grabs right now. Swansea a week or so ago, I probably would have had in there, but now with Steve Cooper departing, there's a little bit more of a question mark over them. And yeah, like I said, those other 2 spots are really up for grabs. If I had to throw a couple of teams in there now, and maybe even there's a bit of dark horse, but I think a lot of people are going with them. I like the look of QPR at the moment. They ended last season very well. Warburton has a bit of an identity about what he wants to do. I think that they've been quite savvy as well in the transfer market with the business that they've done. And then there's a last team that I'll throw Middlesbrough in there, because you can never write Neil Warnock off, can you? And I think he's also building a bit of a project there at Middlesbrough. It wasn't maybe the flashiest of seasons for them last time, but it was certainly an improvement on the last one. I think that given Neil Warnock couple of years in charge, you might have the code cracked there. So yeah, I'll go with those to make up my top 6, I think. And then for a winner from those, see, I don't want to be boring and just say Sheffield United, because that would be so dull to have the 3 going straight back up.
They've never won a playoff, have they, Sheffield United? So
that's, yeah. So it's probably not a wise call to go for them. I'll go for QPR. They always seem to pop up with the moment, don't they? I'll back them to be a real dark horse. Why not? Yeah, they do look strong, to QPR for sure. But ones who don't look strong, so the bottom 3. So this is the ugly side to the prediction, isn't it? The sort of less fun ones. Who do you see sort of knocking on the relegation door next year? The bottom 3 at the moment is tough to do. I think the one name that most people have in there right away is probably going to be Derby. With the way they finished last season and all the complications that are going on around the club at the moment, Rooney sort of having to rebuild that side on free transfers. If you've seen the sort of trial list that they've had there recently, their squad is literally made up of teenagers and then people who are going to be like over 35 next season. So it's all a bit of a mishmash, really. So I think that Derby, with all the off the field issues that they've got going on, I think it'll be a very tough year for them. The 3 promoted clubs that are coming up, obviously their aims will all be to stay in the Championship. I did a little bit of digging in terms of the sort of historical research in terms of how the 3 newly promoted clubs generally tend to get on in the Championship. And on average, over the last 10 years or so, there's only really tends to be one of those newly promoted clubs who then go straight back down. I've got a bit of a gut feeling that Blackpool will be all right next season. I think they've got a few shades of sort of Barnsley about them when they came up. Neil Critchley, manager who's formerly worked at Liverpool and stuff like that. He's got some connections to him. So I think that they brought in quite a youthful group of players that could be quite exciting next season. Peterborough, I'm a little bit up in the air on at the moment. I think it'll be quite fun and score a lot of goals. But what happens with Clark Harris, I think, will be quite instrumental for their season. I know they shipped a few goals last season, and if they don't, shape up maybe in that aspect, they certainly could be dragged into something down there. And then that last team, you could throw a Hull in there maybe, or even a Huddersfield, perhaps. I think that last spot really is going to be open and up for grabs. And who knows, someone else could be dragged in. I'm hopeful that my side, North End, are going to be able to have a bit of a boring season next time round, and we'll be well clear of any relegation dangers. But I think Derby, and then maybe 2 of those 3 promoted clubs, maybe due the drop. But someone will always get dragged in there from nowhere, won't they?
Finally, who do you see as the real last season? We had Emi Buendia, didn't we, sort of light up the championship amongst some other players at Norwich as well, you Todd Cantwells, etc. Really exciting players. Who do you sort of look at next season as across the championship and you think, yeah, they're going to really sort of light the place up?
So it depends who stays, first of all, from those sort of big clubs coming down. I expect that Pereira probably will be off from West Brom. We've already seen him sort of light up the championship once. As a shout that's maybe a little bit out there, it's not happened for him so far at the club he's at, is Ryan Brewster. He came into Sheffield United with sort of a lot of expectations with that big price tag coming from Liverpool. It wasn't probably the best environment for him to go into at the time. Sheffield United ended up struggling that season, but he's done it at this level before. He's got a cracking record with Swansea in the past. And if they can get sort of the right players around him and they can get him in the right headspace for next season, I've got a bit of a feeling that Ryan Brewster could be great, but I'm sure people have clipped this at the end of the season when he scored about 2 goals and I've been proven wrong. But I'll throw him out on him, Ryan Brewster, for next season.
I'm with you on that. I think there's definite potential with Ryan Brewster. I've seen him play for the England youth teams quite a lot, and when he was at Swansea at this level as well, he looked a fantastic player. So I think that's a good shout, and especially if they play, it's probably unlikely with the manager they've got, but if they have a 2 up front with him and McBurney, they both could really work off each other really well, which will be interesting. Ben, thank you for coming on to Andy Takes That Chance. Looking forward to getting to know you more across the season as well. Just let us know where we can find you and what you do on social media and YouTube.
Yeah. So you can check all my stuff out over on YouTube at BenHD. We do a lot of sort of championship predictions, championship previews, a lot of transfer rumours around this time as well. And all that good championship stuff at the moment. It's all happening at the moment heading into this new season. So make sure to come on over.
And I do have a mate who raves about your channel, actually. He's a big fan. And he did mention that you've taken a bit of a liking to the Huddersfield kit this year as well.
Oh, it's up. I've got it as the best home kit. I ranked it as. Yeah. Come out from Championship. Honestly, massive fan of it. Love it.
So even if it's a bad season, at least we've got the kit. There's always that.
Exactly.
So there's always that.
Exactly.
But Ben, thanks for coming on, and a pleasure to meet you as well.
All the best. Cheers for having me, mate.
Okay, so thanks to Ben. Ben's someone that we'll hopefully be collaborating with a bit more going forward next season as well, on a couple of bits and pieces. Decent as well there. I think he's got a new subscriber from you, hasn't he, Josh? After that little cameo appearance.
Yeah, I was very impressed with the lad. Say lad, he's probably similar age to me, but he spoke really well and very insightful. I thought about Town. He knows his fair share about all the championship clubs, and I've actually checked out his YouTube channel. He's got a lot of interesting videos on there. Spent half an hour or so having a look at them today. So I think you should go check him out if championship football is your thing.
Amongst others as well. Right then. Especially us. So let's get our if you don't follow us on YouTube and you do listen via that channel, make sure you click the subscribe button. I think once we get to 1,000, my OCD goes down a level with it being on sort of 943 or 942. Right, so we've got some fun and games coming up next season as well. We're going to have some new fantasy games. We're going to have an FPL game and a championship game as well with Gaffer. We've got our link up with FanHub as well moving forward, which we're interested to see how FanHub looks next season. And I think next season, with fans being allowed back into the grounds, FanHub will come into its own a little bit more, especially with the check-in facility. And also you can use FanHub to listen to Andy Takes That Chance as well as you're driving or whatnot to these away games and during the week. So I think that'll come in. And there's obviously, they've got some partners as well. So they partner with a number of different companies. So they're hopeful of pushing out a couple of prizes for those fans that do quite well in following their clubs as well. So it's something worth keeping an eye on as well. Right, okay. So our next interview is with Ryan Dilks and Justin Peach, who produced the excellent Second Tier podcast. We've been involved with them for the last 12 months, and we're going to be involved a bit next season as well. And this podcast comes with a recommendation from Brady and myself as well. And we both chatted to Ryan and Justin and their thoughts on next season as well. Right, guys. So if you could just let us know what you made of Huddersfield last season, how you thought the season went in particular.
First half, good, steady, looked like it was going to be progress. And then quickly all went down the toilet, didn't it? Losing Josh Cromer is obviously a massive blow, but that's no excuse for how atrocious Huddersfield were defensively. It was defensive mistake after defensive mistake. And in the second half of the season, they were no doubt the worst team in the division defensively. It was just lucky, really, that they had that first half of the season form, which kept them above the relegation battle.
Yeah, completely agree with Ryan. There's argument to say that Huddersfield are one of the worst teams in the second half of the season. If not the worst, maybe Bristol City might have a thing to say about that. But yeah, as Ryan said, it's that first half of the season that really kept Huddersfield afloat. But I wouldn't say you could almost see it coming, but the recruitment policy change, I guess, with Phil Hodgkinson coming in, it seemed to really impact what happened throughout the rest of the season, because you got to January and there was a lot of patchwork. There was Richard Keogh, there was Yaya Sanogo, there was Omar Nias. It was just plasters on top of very big wounds that needed addressing, and it looks like it has been addressed. So hopefully better times coming for Huddersfield this season.
And what have you made of the transfer window so far for Huddersfield? Obviously, it's not closed yet, but what have you made in particular of the players who they've brought in? And you mentioned the defensive frailties as well. So they've brought in Matty Pearson and Levi Colwill as well. Justin, who's a player that you seem to quite like.
I've been really impressed with Huddersfield's recruitment. I think Josh Ruffles from Oxford's a good addition as well on a free transfer. It's been really smart recruitment because they've got it done very early. They've got it done on the cheap. I think that's quite I wouldn't say that's a disrespectful thing to say, but I think it's given a bit of a disservice to the players that they brought in. But as you say, Matty Pearson's a good signing as well. Jordan Rhodes, well, it's a bit romantic, but we all want him to hit 15, 20 goals. But even if he contributes a little bit, because there's Fraser Campbell, who we know can score goals, there's Josh Cromer, who's the gem up front. I think there's a group of players there that can probably get 30 goals between them, which is a good standing for Huddersfield, especially jumping up the table or trying to jump up the table. So yeah, I've been quite impressed with the recruitment. And as we said about Levi Colwill, he's a composed defender at the back. Naby Sarr, I don't know if I like Naby Sarr or not as a player, just because he's got a lot of mistakes in him as a ball-playing defender. And I think that was quite prevalent in Huddersfield last season. So bringing in someone like Colwill, who will take time to get used to the Championship, I think bringing in someone like him is going to help Huddersfield play out from the back and really stamp the manager's philosophy.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, I was just going to carry on from that. Yeah, I think the signings that we've seen have, just addressed what was the clear and obvious areas which needed strengthening, really. They brought in, 4 defenders on free transfers, which is a clear sign that the defence was the big weak point from last season. And I wouldn't say I agree with Justin that it's really impressive. I think Turton and Ruffles are 2 lads who have been knocking about the lower leagues for quite some time now. Maybe time for them to step up. They're coming into their prime, so could be a decent bit of business. Pearson was fairly solid for Luton last season, but Levi Colwill is someone I am excited to see how he takes to the Championship as well. It'll be interesting to see who starts at left back out of Ruffles and Toffolo. Toffolo is someone I'm a massive fan of, but whether Corberan persists with the 3 at the back that we saw last season would make sense for someone like Toffolo, and maybe Ruffles might be seen as someone who could slip into that back 3. We'll have to wait and see. But it looks like solid business. Still not sure on Jordan Rhodes. He's someone who has been out of form for quite some time now, but I do agree with Justin. Everyone wants to see Jordan Rhodes be the same player that we saw all those years ago.
Yeah, and you guys both kind of, slightly different opinions there, we'll say, of the transfers so far. But how do you see it playing out for Huddersfield this season? Do you think it'll be better than last season or hopefully not for us, but worse?
I think it's just another season of transition for Huddersfield. I would be surprised if that second half of the season form continues. But I can't see them troubling the top half of the table, if I'm honest.
I might disagree a little bit with Ryan. I remember I read an article not too long ago about the Premier League legacy for Huddersfield, and I can't remember for the life of me where I read it. It might have been
the Athletic, yeah.
Examiner. It might have been the Athletic. So hopefully one of you guys might, yeah. But yeah, it was a really good article, and it essentially just said that Huddersfield started again last season. They started from scratch, and I do agree with Ryan that there is a transition. I think needed again for Huddersfield. I don't think it can get worse than last season. Bear in mind how badly form was. I think there was 2 or 3 wins in the last 20, 25 games off the top of my head, which is a frightening statistic. And the key thing is avoiding that form going into the new season. But I think the signings that they've made, getting the business done early, the type of players they brought in, I think it's going to be key to Corbrand's philosophy, and they've got another year under the belt to transition that. So I think a mid-table finish, they are in a much better state than a lot of teams. I think a mid-table finish is the peak of what I think Huddersfield would be aiming for, and then building on that for the seasons after.
So the policy at Huddersfield at the moment is really to bring players in young, relatively cheap, to work with a coach like Carlos Corbrand and his coaching team, maybe start them towards the B team and then build them up and look to sell them on in future. So Huddersfield have a record of doing that from, going back from 2012 when we were first promoted back to the Championship. And, Jordan Rhodes was one of those, Connor Cody, etc., Jacob Butterfield, and so on. This seems to be the policy moving forward as well. Do you see any sort of standout players at Huddersfield who can really stand up next season and be one of the shining lights of the Championship? Or do you see potentially anyone breaking through as well? We're looking at the likes of Scott High, Sorba Thomas, etc., who may come through and be a surprise package like Josh Koroma was last season.
I think Aaron Rowe is someone for me who I've been waiting to break into the first team for some time. Hopefully he can do that this season. I know he started a few games towards the back end of last season, and this will hopefully be the season that we finally see him become more of a first team regular for Huddersfield. The obvious shouts are the likes of Lewis O'Brien, Harry Toffolo, players who we've mentioned plenty of times. Lewis O'Brien probably maybe had a bit of a step back in his progression last season, but now hopefully he's someone who can continue to build upon what we've already seen, because he's a top player. Everyone knows he's a top player. It's just about him doing it on a regular basis. And then Toffolo had a couple of injuries last season, didn't he? But he's someone who I think could possibly be playing in the Premier League at some point.
I don't think we've seen the best of Josh Koroma yet. And again, it's an obvious shout, but I think we only got a glimpse of what he's capable of last season. And he's a player for me that came from nowhere. It was a bit of an odd signing to make, but he really started to develop, and under Corbrand he started to push on. But as Ryan said, I think the other obvious ones are the likes of there's Lewis O'Brien, there's Toffolo, and Aaron Rowe. So they're the players I think that will need to step up for Huddersfield. But as I say, Josh Koroma I think is going to be a key man. I think, as I say, we've not seen the best of him yet, so I'm really excited to see what he can do if he avoids injury.
Yeah, and I suppose, well, the other question is you've made it clear you don't see Huddersfield anywhere near the top. Your top 6 for the season. I know the Championship's always the hardest league to predict, I'd say, but who do you guys fancy for the top 6?
Just bear in mind we will use this against you later on in the year.
100%.
Well, we've got our league table predictions coming up soon, and I'm still struggling to nail down my definitive top 6. I think one side I'm definitely fancying to be in and around the top 2 this season is West Brom, because I think they've recruited well. I think Valérien Ismaël can continue to show that he's a quality manager at this level. And with the players they've already got from last season, then they're definitely too good to be anything other than fighting for the top two. Other sides I'm looking at are QPR, who did so well in the second half of last season, and I reckon they can continue playing the style of football that we saw in the second half. And the other one, maybe a bit of an outsider, is Luton, because they have also recruited really well this summer. And Nathan Jones is a manager who knows how to get the best out of players. He was making Luton perform unbelievable things in the Championship last season. And now that they brought in the likes of Carlos Mendes-Gomez, I think they're one to keep an eye on. An outsider for the top six at the very least.
Yeah, I think Ryan stole my thunder a bit. I fancy Luton as well, to be honest. And there's a lot of comparables between Luton and Huddersfield, but I think Luton, for example, if we're baking a cake, I think Huddersfield are just putting the ingredients into a bowl, whereas Luton have put the cake into the oven already. So I think they're just slightly further ahead of Huddersfield in that sense. But yeah, I think the other one for me, I think I've said Stoke every season, and even Cardiff. I think Mick McCarthy's putting a real Mick McCarthy side together. And I fancied Cardiff, I think, for the top two. Ryan might correct me, for the top two for the last 2 seasons since we were doing the podcast. But I think this year might be their year under Mick McCarthy. But yeah, it's too hard to say at the minute. But I think the teams that we've mentioned so far are probably a good shout for the top 6, with the surprise of Luton.
The bottom end of the table this year looks quite interesting. I don't think last year I found it quite easy to predict who would be down there and who would be up there. This year, like Ryan said, it's more difficult to sort of definitively look and say, yes, this team will definitely be up there, and yes, that team will definitely be down there. In terms of bottom 3, we've had some predictions back from the fans of other Championship clubs and some of our own, and they vary quite differently. Huddersfield do appear in a couple of these predictions, which is understandable given the form at the end of last year. But in terms of bottom 3, who are you guys looking at? And I know it's going to be difficult to predict, but who are your early thoughts on who you think may be down there?
I'll say this. It's completely different to last season, because I think just about every league table prediction had the bottom 3, which was eventually the bottom 3. This season, I think the Championship is much more competitive at the bottom. I'll start off by saying Derby, for obvious reasons. Anyone who knows what's going on at Pride Park at the moment can completely understand that, and I can't see them finishing anything other than bottom at the very moment. Other sides, I'd probably say Blackpool, just because some of their recruitment has mostly been from lower league sides. And I can't say I've been too impressed, but I am a big fan of Neil Critchley, the manager, and hopefully they can continue their progression. Apart from that, it's a bit of a free-for-all for the last place in the relegation zone for me. Maybe someone like Bristol City, just because they were so bad in the second half of last season. They were absolutely abysmal, without a doubt the worst team in the Championship for me in the second half of last season. They brought in Rob Atkinson, who's a player I like, but apart from that, there hasn't been much else yet, but there is quite a bit at the time of the transfer window still to go.
Yeah, it feels a little bit clearer for me. I think Derby are an obvious candidate, bearing in mind that they've got 13 players contracted at the moment. And I mean, half the squad is currently trialists. I think someone like Coventry, I think they've lost loan players like Matty James and Leo Ostigard, and they've not quite replaced them yet. So I'm a bit nervous as to how, although I'm a big fan of Coventry and Mark Robbins, I think they might be down there. Blackpool again, Ryan's mentioned Blackpool. Hull City as well. Hull City, I know they're a team coming up, so it might be an obvious one, but they're under a transfer embargo. They've only been able to recruit 3 transfers. Their squad last season doesn't look as strong as some of the teams that have come up previously from League One. So I'm a bit concerned about Hull, and if they can get this transfer embargo lifted and they can recruit some better standard players on loan, even they might have a better chance of staying up. But I think the obvious 3 are probably Derby, Hull, and Blackpool for me.
Great stuff.
Yeah, I think that's it. Pleased to hear that you lads haven't picked us. So that's a welcome change in the bottom 3.
I'm kind of thinking similar position to last season, if I'm honest. Maybe slightly higher. As I say, it's so competitive this season. Like there's so many teams who are just condensed around the middle of the table that I'm just really struggling to nail down who I think is going to finish where. It's crazy.
Yeah. I think Corbrand's plugged the right gaps, so I'm fully behind Chino Man this year. I think he can.
You're a big fan, aren't you, Justin? You are a big fan of Carl's.
I adore the guy. I'm so jealous as a Derby fan to see someone as progressive and forward-thinking as Corbrand somewhere not Derby, essentially. And as I say, I think he's just plugged the right gaps. You know, he's brought in extra goals needed in Jordan Rhodes. So if Karoma's injured, you've got Campbell and Jordan Rhodes. He will score goals, Ryan. Don't doubt the man. And Colwell is, I'm really looking forward to it. Although it might fall flat on its face, like Clark-Salter. Jake Clark-Salter is a good example of where it can go. And then Tamori and Gurhi are examples where it can go as well. So
that's fantastic.
Having Karoma back's massive, isn't it? Just because he was clearly Huddersfield's best player last season, even though he was only there for like half a season before he got injured. So obviously that's massive, but the rest is a bit unpredictable.
And I think that's it, guys. So thank you very much for giving us your thoughts on the coming season, and looking forward to collaborating with you guys again next year. For those that haven't listened to the Second Tier podcast, let us know just whereabouts we can find you and the best place to listen.
You can find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Just search Second Tier Podcast. Otherwise, on our social medias, it's at Second Tier Pod. Pretty much everywhere, I think.
He's got a recommendation from me and Brady as well. So thanks, guys, and we'll speak to you guys next season.
Nice one. Cheers, chaps.
Yeah, so decent Second Tier podcast. I always find it a good listen. To be honest, there's a lot of the play. I think they have a good mix of games and comments on there, and always sort of other fans as well, which is pretty decent. Decent to do that, Brady, wasn't it? And get their thoughts on this season.
Yeah, Ryan and Justin are good lads. Listening to their podcast as well. I think Ryan likes his hot takes, but it's again, don't want to bum everyone out, but we were pretty shocking last season, so I think it's fair that people aren't expecting us to pull up any trees this season. But interesting to see who they think. I think they were saying QPR are a bit of a dark horse, so I think it'd be interesting to see if that's true.
Right, speaking of dark horses and predictions, it's now time to hear your thoughts. So in episode 1, Cozzy, Simon, Pause, myself, Matt Glennon, Matt Wilson, we've all, and even more, and thanks to everybody who sent their videos in as well. We had sort of 8 or 9 fans send videos in, including Cozzy Bear as well. So they've all given their predictions for this coming season. We're going to throw them all into a spreadsheet and use them against people, as the season goes on. And at the end of next season, we'll see who does well. And last season we did pretty well, actually. All of us did pretty well last season, so that's obviously not going to be replicated this year. But the two of you, so what's your expectation? So you two converse between yourselves here, I think, and I'll jump in where necessary. But how do you two think this season is going to go for Huddersfield Town? What are your sort of expectations, your fears? How do you see this playing out? And it's obviously asking you to predict the future in a lot of ways, but take how you're feeling now and just kind of extrapolate that over the season, and just let us know what you're expecting and things you're excited for as well, and things that you're worried about.
Well, Josh, do you want to go?
Yeah, go on. Well, excited to be back in the ground first and foremost. Last season wasn't much fun anyway, but watching it on a screen was even worse. Although you kind of shut it down and forget about it. So I'll probably be saying opposite in a few weeks. But
you're gonna miss Snoop Dogg and you Just Eat, aren't you? And
all that, yeah. I don't know if we can still watch it for away games or whatever, but it was a really good service, to be fair. And it was pretty connection-wise pretty strong most of the time. But you can't beat being in the ground, can you? So yeah, really looking forward to getting back. But in terms of what we're going to see on the pitch when we're in the ground, I'm always hopeful at the start of every season. Normally those hopes are dashed, but I think we can. 15th would be like a good season, wouldn't it? Which is quite depressing to say. But I think if you're predicting anything above that, people just aren't going to take you seriously. So I'm going to go for 15th, an optimistic 15th. I know people say last season, first half of the season, we were good, second half we were bad, but I don't think it's as black and white as that. I think even when we were good, there was still quite a lot of holes in the team, and we were still leaking goals. Second half of the season, injuries were horrendous. So the recruitment we've done should hopefully prevent that happening next season, hopefully. Certainly not as bad. So I'm hoping for just not being in danger, not looking over our shoulder all the time, and just enjoying it. Really, just want to see the team go out and give it everything, and that's the minimum you ask for. But just try and just enjoy themselves. I know it's hard if we're on a losing run, but I want to see the players looking like they want to play for us, and just get a bit of positivity back in the ground.
No, I completely agree. With what Josh's saying, I think obviously the last 18 months has been hard for everyone. And I think it was good that the football was on, but it doesn't beat being in the ground. You can voice your frustrations, you can have a pint and be like, "Oh, we're a bit rubbish," aren't we? And I think that kind of helps. So I'm really looking forward to that. I think on the pitch, it will be an improvement on last season, but not by much. We've added to the squad. I think the additions, we saw, as Josh mentioned, with the injuries in the second half of the season, the drop off from Pippa and Toffolo to Haney and Brown wasn't, it was poor. And I think, Turton and Ruffles, I think Ruffles is, a really good signing, did really well, 6 goals and 6 assists for Oxford in League One. I think the recruitment, in terms of adding to the squad and the depth, I think has been really well. I think I quite like, I think we were talking about it, Matt, but Matty Pearson, I wasn't sure of that at first, but getting kind of, I wouldn't say he'd be as good as Peter Clark, but I think we do need a bit of no nonsense given how
get
many
those vibes, hey? Those
do,
Peter
yeah,
Clark vibes.
Yeah, it just, well, we can see the most goals in the league. It was laughable at times when you particularly think about all the errors. I don't want to be football dad, but sometimes you do just need a no-nonsense defender. Yeah, I know Carlos wants to play expansive football, and Levi Colwell, who we signed online from Chelsea, I think he can really help build up attacks. He's very good with the ball with his feet, but you've got to stop conceding goals. And I think if you can have someone like Matty Pearson who's going to boot it clear, that's not a bad thing for us. So I actually think we look. I know Fleetwood, but we lost to Fleetwood, but it is pre-season. I do think we actually look a bit more defensively sound, particularly with the addition of players we've got. It's almost like the centre-back pairing is going to be completely new, I'd expect. Again, I'm still concerned about creativity. Town has struggled with lack of creativity for years now.
Like when teams sit back, if teams sit back, we just have no idea, do we? Because we don't have that lock-on picker, if you like.
Exactly, and maybe that is Siani. Obviously, he's just joined online from Norwich. Again, Josh talked about it in our preview for the warm-up, but anyone on a YouTube highlights reel can look amazing. But he did, there was some nice stuff. I think it's one of them we'll wait and see, because I think, if we're being honest, no one can say if he's going to be a success or not, because no one's an expert in Luxembourg football and also Huddersfield Town fan. Maybe they are. Get in touch. My real concern is, though, if I'm being honest, and I don't want to bring the negativity down, is if we're on a bad run, there's a part of me that wonders if Corcoran's going to last the season. I think, particularly how bad the run was towards the end of the last season. I think if he gets off to a poor start, he could be gone. I think that would be fair. For me, I like the style of football that Corcoran's going to play. I think he had his reasons, there was reasons why stuff didn't go as well as it did last year, but also he has to take some blame, and that's kind of the thing that's lingering in the back of my head. Will he be here at the end of the season? And then that kind of throws all predictions, but I'll be positive. I agree with Josh. I think anything higher than 15th would be amazing, which is sad. I think we're going to be 17th. That's me kind of hoping. I think the league is a lot stronger this year. than it was last year as well. So I think it's going to be a tough one. But we have recruited well in terms of squad. It's just, it's just that creativity for me.
Josh, you're saying 15th, or is that you saying highest possible 15th?
Yeah, an optimistic 15th. So yeah,
okay.
15th.
So we've got 15th and 17th, which wouldn't be too bad a season, I think, based on the last two. It'd be slight progress, which is pretty good. You mentioned Matty Pearson as well, Brady. The next question on here is the best signing that we've made, and in terms of the transfers who've come in, 6 or 7 players come into the squad. I think it's 7 or 8 now, if you include John Russell as well, the B team player. We're actually being a lot more active than the majority of clubs in the Championship as well. We needed to be, that's obvious. That's obvious. But we've gone out there and we've done business. There's nothing really. There's nothing really to complain about in terms of us sitting back and doing nothing. Some people will maybe question, Cozzy, for example, wants to know where the quality is. In his preview, he's worried about the quality moving forward. This is obviously pre-Sinani signing, which is, he may add that. So what do you think to our recruitment then so far? And who are you looking forward to? Do you have any concerns still in the squad? And, what would you do if you did? And we'll go with you first, Brady, because you look like you're ready to fire as well. Like a cold spring.
I'm excited. Well, we've made signings, which is always exciting. I think Pearson's a good addition. I think the one that's exciting for me is Colwell. I think, we've seen Chelsea centre-backs in the Championship do really well. You think of Mark Gurhey, who's just moved to Palace for 18 million. You think of, what was the other one? Tomori, who's obviously had a good season with Derby and now at AC Milan. He looks exciting. I think, obviously, we did there was an article we did on the sign-in, which you can go read, and that he is rated higher than both of those were before they went out on loan than Gurhey and Tomori.
Slightly younger as well, isn't he, I think?
Slightly younger. So I think that's an exciting one, particularly as I was touching on earlier, if you're thinking about the lack of creativity, he could be really useful, particularly depending on how Corberan wants to play in actually building up attacks and being crucial in that. So I think he's the one that's exciting for me. I think Ruffles as well. I know Toffolo is one of the first names on the team sheet, but again, he's got a good attacking returns and he can play further forward. So quite excited by that. I think that I wouldn't say it's a bit of a coup, but I think it's a good addition. So they're the Colwell and Ruffles are kind of the standouts for me.
Josh, I'll pick up for that.
Yeah, Colwell for me. 18 years old, Chelsea Academy product. They only produce, not only, but they have a lot of good players coming through there, don't they? So, and they've got very high hopes for him at Chelsea. So, and from what I've seen of him in pre-season friendlies, someone described him as a Rolls Royce sort of defender, and I think that's a good description. Someone who he's not afraid to carry the ball out himself. So I think he could be the one to watch for me. Aside from him, we've added the depth, haven't we? But I think Pearson at the back, Brady, you mentioned it, someone who's going to provide a bit of accountability back there. I know we had Richard Keogh last season, but he wasn't really he didn't do too bad, did he? But Pearson's a younger man. He's got a lot to prove at this level.
Not overly upset that he's not here, though, are we? To be fair,
no. But what I meant was Keogh was a communicator, wasn't he? But yeah, I think Pearson will bring that as and more, to be honest. And I think he can be a real leader back there. Naby Sarr doesn't really talk too much on the pitch. Colwell's a young lad. Edmonds Green, he's not experienced. So I think key for us is going to be keeping Pearson fit, to be honest. I think we do need his presence back there. I think he'll be a key player for us. So on that basis, I'd say the player I'm looking forward to seeing the most is Colwell, but I think the most important signing could be Pearson.
Okay.
Sorry, Matt, just before you jump in, one player I think, when I was thinking about this, that I think actually is going to really come into their own is Nichols. I know signing a goalkeeper on a free from MK Dons isn't exciting, but we know what Schofield's good at, shot stopping, but also what he's not so good at. And I think that was an area we did need to address, and I wouldn't be surprised if Nichols becomes our number one as the season progresses. So I think
he's looked good as well in pre-season. I've been impressed with him.
Okay. So speaking of being impressed with, we're going to move on to our predictions now for the top 6. So we'll start with automatic promotion. Top 2, there seems to be a very familiar theme developing with especially 4 of the clubs which appear in everybody's top 6. So I'm guessing this is going to be no different. But Josh, I'll go to you first while Brady's Googling odds checker to see who's up.
No, I've got mine.
So what do you reckon, Josh? Who are you going for in the top 2 this season?
I think Fulham will run away with the league. So obviously first. Second, I'll go for West Brom. And then in terms of playoffs, I think, Sheffield United, Bournemouth. And then last 2 playoff spots, I'm going to go for a couple of old school managers to sneak in. So we're going for Cardiff with Big Mick, Middlesbrough with Neil Warnock. I just think looking at the teams in the Championship this season, I think that a team like a Cardiff or a Middlesbrough could, grind their way into the playoffs. So, that's my top 6.
That's very close to what I had. I had Cardiff or Middlesbrough for the 6th spot. But Brady, have you got anything different, or are you going for something quite similar?
No, pretty much the same. I think, so I've got West Brom to win because I like Valier and Ishmael, and I think West Brom have got a good squad. I'm not so sure about Fulham. I think they've probably got one of the best squad on paper, but I'm not convinced about Marco Silva. So I've actually gone Bournemouth as my second choice in my top 2. So West Brom and Bournemouth. Scott Parker's there. I think Bournemouth do have some good players. At the time of recording, Dan Juma's not left. I think he's due a good season. They've got Solanke.
I think there's a bid for Dan Juma as well, and they're expecting him to potentially go, but he's still there at the time. So you never know.
Still there for now. It could change. I think Fulham. I think like what we saw with Watford, obviously Town beat them, but Fulham, I think, will start slow. I think the reason I think these are a bit easier to predict is not to be boring, but obviously the leap in terms of quality and also finance for the Premier League and the Championship is just growing all the time. So I think all 3 relegated clubs are going to be in the top 6. I think it's a disaster if they don't. So Sheffield United are in there for me. So West Brom, Bournemouth, Fulham, Sheffield United. I've also gone for Warnock's boys, Borough. I think, old-fashioned manager. And I would say I found it particularly hard for the last 2 playoff spots because it's always someone you don't expect. So I've gone Borough because, again, Matty Crooks will fire him to the playoffs. But also QPR. I know they're kind of everyone's dark horses, but when I was thinking about it, Charlie Austin, as much as we enjoyed his tears when we beat him a couple of seasons ago, him and Lyndon Dykes and Elias Chair is a player I'd like. Obviously, we've got Chris
Stefan Johansson as well now. He's a really good player.
Their keeper's great as well, Diang. Yeah, so I fancy them, and they've got a lot of good attacking players. So that's my 6. But there's always a team that surprises you. That's around the playoffs. So
we've got a dark horse as well. So me and Josh had a heated debate earlier about the dark horse potential of Luton Town. Luton are, someone who I think do pretty well, in terms of recruitment and analysis. I like that. I like what they're doing. I don't think they'll get the playoffs, but I think they might surprise a few people. Josh doesn't, but we'll see at the end of the season.
I think they'll be nearer relegation than playoffs.
No, I don't. I disagree. Top 10. I don't think.
Get your money on there. Bookies don't fancy him.
What you two say? Are you two having a bet against each other? Is this a preview show bet, and the loser gives an amount to the Town Foundation? Is that what's going on here?
All right, yeah, let's do that. Why not? What 20 quid for the Town Foundation? I think Luton will finish in the top 10.
Okay, so what's the bet?
Are you having a piece of that, Josh?
Won't. Yeah. So along 11th and below.
Yeah.
Are you giving? I would have given him to Wolf Brady. I think you sold yourself short.
I said it now.
I would have said 12th. I would have said 12th upwards, and I think Josh should have taken you on that.
No, well, it's money going to charity, isn't it? So
Town Foundation's got 20 quid at the end of the season now, and this is recorded, so no backing out. So
exactly.
There we go. So dark horse, Luton. Josh, have you picked a dark horse who you think might come up on the rails that nobody really expects? Birmingham,
but
maybe.
Depends what you define as a dark horse, doesn't it? Really. Not
Town.
Birmingham, no.
Town.
Town,
Big
yeah.
dark horse, aren't they?
That'd be the darkest of horses.
Yeah.
There's no one. I'm not going to pick one, because no one stands out. I'm looking at the list here, and apart from the teams that have already been mentioned, there's no one stands out to me. So I'm not going to say one for the sake of it. So there's going to be no dark horses.
Fair enough.
I don't know. Again, it's what you want to judge as a dark horse, but I think Forest for me. I don't think they'll get playoffs, but Chris Hughton's a good manager at this level. They've got loads of money. They've got about 30 odd players. They've got the resources, and they were pretty much in the playoffs not last season before until they bottled it on the final day. So
I think they'll be in the running for the playoffs. I just picked Cardiff and Borough, but could have easily gone for Forest.
Yeah,
Chris Hughton's a top class manager at this level, isn't he? He's a top championship class manager, you could say. So they've definitely got the right man in charge there to get them back to the Premier League for the first, which would be the first time since 1995, 96, somewhere around there. It's been a long time they've been away, really long time for Nottingham Forest. Right, so we'll flip it back onto, before we flip it back onto Town, we need a bottom three, don't we? So relegation. Josh, you going Luton Town?
No, I'm not going to be that mean to them. I think they're not that bad. I don't think there's going to be a distant bottom three. I think there's going to be a lot of teams involved in the relegation scrap.
Yeah.
I think Derby will finish bottom. I think it's just that club's a mess at the moment, and I think they'll go the same way as Wednesday. Them to finish bottom. And then I'm looking at Peterborough, Blackpool, Hull, Town, Coventry, Birmingham, Luton. No, not Luton. I think they won't be far off, but I don't think they'll go down, as I said. So I'm going to go for Peterborough and Blackpool to join Derby. I just don't think they'll have enough quality in the squad. But I don't think they'll be blown away, as I said. I think they'll be right in the mix, and they'll have some good results through the season. But I think over the course of the season, Blackpool and Peterborough just going to come up short, along with Derby.
Okay, Brady, who have you got?
Yeah, pretty much. I've got the same three as Josh. I completely agree with him. I think it was really hard to pick after the four teams for the top six, and I think likewise for the bottom three, because there is going to be so many teams kind of hovering around there. And I do think Town, even though I would like them to have a better season, I do think they're going to be one of those teams like around there. But yeah, Derby, I think, there's talk they might not even be able to field a team against us. So,
no pressure.
If we don't win,
they are going
to beat us 1-0. It's such a short
shithousey of shithouse wins, isn't it? 1-0 or something.
Yeah. I'm surprised Rudy's not going to re-register himself at this rate. Blackpool, again, I think they've got Richard Keogh, so, they might, but I think it'll be too much. Peterborough and Hull. I do like, I don't think Grant McCann's the best. I know they won the league, but I'm not a big fan of him. And I do like Malik Wilkes, but apart from that, there's not really anyone jumping out at me at Hull. So, Derby, Blackpool and Peterborough for me.
Okay. And we will now flip it back onto Town. Last two questions really are Town's, and you can do this all in one. So who do you fancy as Town's player of the year this coming season? Who do you fancy will take that gong, and who will be the breakout player from the B team? So last year you were class, potentially, Aaron Rowe, I think you'll probably say he kind of broke through towards the end. Josh Koroma was obviously the breakout player from last year. Who are you going for this year? Brady.
Oh, okay. Breakthrough. I said it earlier, but for our warm-up preview, but I think John Russell, because he's played 20 plus games in League One. I know he's been signed for the B team, but out of all the B team players, he's probably kind of the one who maybe is ready to make that jump. He's a box-to-box and midfielder, and he can play as a number 10. And I actually do think, obviously, there's rumours going around at the moment. Well, we don't know if O'Brien's going to be here when the transfer window shuts, and I wonder. I don't think our midfield's probably the best. I think it is an area of weakness. I'd like another player there, and I wonder if he's a tall lad as well, and our midfield's quite small. So he's the one I'm kind of thinking maybe could have a good breakout. Not a hot take because he played 20 odd games in League One. So
no one's actually said him out of all the. So you two guys are the last two Huddersfield fans that have asked that. No one said John Russell, so that's quite. I don't think they have anyway, so that's quite an interesting one. Everybody said pretty much Sorba Thomas or Scott High, so no pressure when it comes to you, Josh. But your player of the year, Brady?
Come
on,
because I think we'll be struggling. I think it's going to be defender.
You think so? You're not having this. You're not having that.
I did think Karoma, but cat's out of the bag with him, isn't it? And I think they'll double up on him. And I wonder if he might be a bit difficult season for him. But I would go for him. I've gone for Pearson. I just think Town fans love someone who gets stuck in, and he seems like that lad. And I think, you know, if we...
Except Peter Clark vibes, and he won it twice, didn't he? Peter Clark back to back, and one of the years probably might have been. I think Jordan Rhodes should have really been ahead of him, but you know, Town fans do love that type of player, that rugged, tough sort of centre back and
industrial,
yeah. Like he should, like he lives on Sturton Estate. Yeah,
I know. Phil Senior was unsure, but honestly, you know, we could. I can't stress it enough. We conceded most goals in the league in a league that had Wickham. So, I don't think we can underestimate a defender who's going to get rid of it. I think we need this season's going to be difficult. So
there was one bit actually. It was against Fleetwood in the second half, and I think we were 2-0 down, and we were constantly trying to keep the ball, and the ball went down the wing, and Matty Pearson just came out of nowhere and smashed it to like Lytham St Anne's. It was, you know, and he pretty much had time to take a touch and play it down the line. But I actually quite enjoyed that. He just went, nah, there's a winger there. I'm going to smash this as far as I can. It was pretty good.
Exactly. I think
I missed players who do that.
Exactly.
I know. Shades of Neil Trotman. It was quite funny.
I love Neil Trotman.
I didn't. It was rubbish, but go on.
I was rubbish, yeah, but
yeah, but he's a good character. So your player of the year is Matty Pearson, and your breakout player John Russell. Good picks them. Josh, what have you got?
Well, I think me and Brady have been copying each other's homework, to be honest, because I'm going for the exact same two names and for very similar reasons. So John Russell, he was at Chelsea as well, wasn't he? So, you know, that's not a bad place to start. And Accrington, they're like a top half League One side. So, you know, he's played consistently for them. John Coleman's a very good manager. You'll have learnt a lot under him. And I think you're right in saying central midfield is probably one of our weakest areas. I do like Scott High, but I think there's an opportunity there for Russell to overtake the likes of Daly and potentially High. There's also Reece Brown, but I think Russell, I think partly why he's joined the B team, he probably sees an opportunity there, and especially with O'Brien potentially leaving and Buchan leaving, you know, there's chances for him to get in the squad. So yeah, that's my reasoning for him. And similarly, for the player of the season, Karoma was the obvious shout, but I think there's a lot of pressure on him this season. I think he will deliver, but I think Pearson will shore up the defence quite a bit, and I think we won't concede as many as last season. And I think he will get a large part of the credit for that if that does come to pass. So I think we'll continue to struggle to score and create goals. So I'm going for defender, and I'm going for Matty Pearson.
Decent. I quite like those picks. You know, this is why you two are together. You two, I can see the two becoming one now all of a sudden very, very quickly. So, right, we'll end this episode on that. Actually, we're going to end this episode with our last interview. That's thanks to you guys, Brady and Josh. Looking forward to listening to the preview show as well next year. It's going to be decent and a laugh by the sounds of it, which is good. And looking forward to hearing some guests on there as well. So our last interview, which is with the deadly duo of the Chicken Trick, Stephen Chicken and David Hartrick. I said to these two, whenever us three get together, we end up talking for absolutely ages, whether it's in WhatsApp or Zoom or whatever. And I said to these guys, we'll aim for 15 minutes. And as you can see from the time left on this podcast, they go over a little bit from that 15 minutes. So thanks to everybody for listening to this episode. There will be a part 3, and I know what you're thinking. Oh, no, not more preview nonsense. Part 3 will be with you quite soon once we've got a number of videos back from other championship clubs. So part 3 is going to be a series of videos from fans of the other clubs in this league to see what they think will happen next season. And like I say, it's always interesting to hear the view of the other side as well. And we've got a couple back, and unsurprisingly, Huddersfield do appear in a few bottom 3 predictions, but we'll take that on the chin, won't we? So thank you for everybody for listening, and here is Stephen and Dave, which will see the show out. Right, guys, what did you make of Huddersfield last season?
Weren't much good, were they? No, I mean, it was obviously a great first half of the season, and I think we probably can use the word. Well, we use the word "great" advisedly there. I think we've kind of got this idea in our head now that it was all sort of sunshine and fireworks in the first half of the season. Then Christmas came, New Year's came, and then suddenly everything turned into putrescence. And it wasn't really how it was. It was very up and down. We had lots of gripes in the first half of the season as well. There were certainly games where people were left pulling their hair out. I think particularly about that trip to Cardiff was pretty abysmal, to be honest. And there were others as well where they just weren't good at all. But in amongst that, there were a lot of very encouraging performances, a lot of great results, big moments. And, you think about them beating Watford, beating Middlesbrough, beating Swansea. These are all teams that were up at that top end of the table. 2 of them made the playoffs. Middlesbrough were in that hunt for a long time before they dropped off the end of the season. And then after the new year, obviously the injuries hit and, all of the good stuff disappeared. We were just left with sort of, we always talked about we had like good town and bad town. And after the injuries hit, we were just left with bad town.
Yeah, the thing I think I would say is that it was a disappointment because it was an underperformance. It was a season of underperformance, and I think that one mantra that me and Steve had. I mean, I think we even got called out on it on the town social, was that we believed this was a lower mid-table squad, and yes, it was a thin squad, but I think last season part of the disappointment comes that when you actually look into it. And you actually look into Town's first team before they were all sort of broken and injured and overplayed and undercooked, and they just got so much wrong that you look at Pippa gets in every championship squad in most first teams, Toffolo the same, Jonny Hogg gets in every championship squad and in most first teams, Janino Bacuna gets in every championship squad, Josh Gromer and Lewis O'Brien play for every championship team, Carol Eiting plays for every championship team, even Isaac Mbenza gets in every championship squad, I would say, probably plays comparative amount. Naby Sarr gets in every championship squad. Christopher Schindler certainly gets in every championship squad and arguably plays. People won't like it, but some of the players who underperformed last season as well, your Pritchards and your Danny Wards, etc., they would be being snapped up by championship clubs. I never bought the fact that the first team in the squad was as bad as everybody said it was. And I still don't, and I still won't. But I think that what happened last season, and Steve knows my theory on this, so feel free to roll your eyes, Steve's, but I think the simple fact is that Corberán needs to find the middle ground more, because everything he did was extremes last season. So it was either really good, really bad. You change everything for the Bournemouth game, and your reaction to that is the extreme of then playing the same team through one of the busiest periods of the season and not making any subs till after the 75th minute. You don't just have a couple of key players out injured. Suddenly everybody goes out injured. Your extreme reaction to that is you go and sign Richard Keogh, you sign Yaya Sanogo, you try to sign Omar Niasse. It was just all over the place last season. It was a roller coaster, and I think that Corberán's inexperience comes into that, and I think that there were signs that by the end of the season there was compromise, there was a bit more change, there was more variety to what Town are doing, and hopefully that's where the season picks up from.
I think going into the season, we had concerns about the squad because you need to sort of remember that they started the season without Naby Sarr. Pippa came in, I think, just before the first, after the League Cup, but before the first game. I think Danny Ward was the only signing who came in before the League Cup kicked off. So I think we were concerned about the squad when we were gearing up to the season, but then they brought in Sarr and Eiting and Pippa, and suddenly it looked a lot better. But I think you always sort of had concerns about likes of D'Amico Dehaney or Jaden Brown, or even
it was thin. The problem was that the minute you get some injuries, Town were struggling, and it was the worst possible season to do that because you were so exposed by the extended bench and the 5 substitutes that failing, or I can't have that it was as thin as some would say, but I think that extended substitutes bench obviously just dials that problem visually up to 10,
because that only changed in November as well, and Corberán complained about that quite vociferously, because I think they did sort of build for an 18-man squad rather than a 20-man squad, and it did make a difference. Like that did go against Town, to be fair, but I mean, as well as I did, Dave, that almost the briefing at the start of last season was, look, we expect we might have a bit of a tough season this year, but we feel like we need to go through this and bring some of the youngsters through and see where we get to because of the finances. They talked about that quite openly. Phil Hodgkinson did before the season started, that, they wanted to keep the money in the bank. They didn't want to go and overspend, chasing a load of nothing. And they felt they had enough talent in the academy to sort of get them through the season in kind of not pushing for the playoffs or anything like that, but just get them through in kind of a relatively safe position. And I think that was a miscalculation. Obviously at Christmas we were saying, I wrote a piece, I think we talked on our podcast, Dave, about, we got it wrong. They were right. This was the right makeup. But then, as you say, when you get 4, 5, 6 first team, starters injured, plus
who had been, some of them had been overplayed as well.
Exactly.
This wasn't just.
It didn't appear out of nowhere.
The thing about an injury crisis is you can put some of it down to bad luck. Like Oumar Niass's injury coming in as a signing and getting injured in that academy game like that, it's just a complete freak injury. But when you get a load of first teamers break down with muscle injuries, or you find out, I mean, how many times, Steve, were we told last season, oh yeah, but so-and-so's playing through an injury?
There were a lot of hammies as well, weren't there?
And I think that says a lot about Corberán's experience. I think he didn't trust players like Scott High, Matty Daly, and it's incredibly difficult. I know 1 or 2 Town fans, I know not sensible Town fans, but there are 1 or 2 Town fans who've basically written off half the youngsters on the strength of last season. And you got to remember, most of them were coming into games with less than 15 minutes left sometimes and being played out of position with no chance to exert them. When Aaron Rowe got some actual football in a position he was comfortable with, look what happened. Scott High in the last game of the season actually got a proper run out, actually got to play from the start, and was Town's best player first half against Reading comfortably.
I think he really got burnt by Bournemouth, didn't he? Because let's be honest, I think there's no sort of hiding from the fact that I think that team against Bournemouth away in December was kind of picked to lose. But I think they thought they were going to lose 2-0, not 5-0. And I think when they lost as badly as they did, and it's worth saying as well, it wasn't just the players that were brought in that played badly that day. Lewis O'Brien had a stinker, for instance. It was the whole
Toffolo, Mr. Reliable. Town's, Mr. Reliable was awful that day.
Yeah, and half the team were bad on the day, and then and that was in the middle of their best run, weirdly enough. But I think after that, Corberán just lost. Jaden Brown, they didn't have a left back for basically almost the whole second half of the season with Toffolo out injured. But he wouldn't pick the player who was meant to be the second choice left back. And,
you look at the players he went through as well in that position. Pippa, Lewis O'Brien, Dwayne Holmes at one point. It was a strange one, that.
Yeah. And, not to say it was necessarily the wrong decision, but like to make that selection choice, Corberán sees Jaden Brown on the training ground, or saw Jaden Brown on the training ground every day, and obviously felt he wasn't up to it. But the club shouldn't have put him in that position. And as I say, I think it was just a little bit of a miscalculation. They weren't a million miles off, and I think the first half of the season sort of showed that. But yeah, they it was a calculated risk, and they got away with it, but only just, like, in terms of not getting relegated. In terms of sort of driving down the goodwill of the fans, it was a bit of a disastrous season, really.
when the best thing you can say about last season is that it's a very good job. There were 3 teams worse than Town.
Yeah.
That's not a great reflection.
4, thankfully. But, hopefully. But, right, thanks for that. So you've mentioned there the thin squad and going into the season with, a little bit, you would say, understacked in certain areas, potentially. Do you think this transfer window, Huddersfield have addressed that so far? And what have you made of the window so far? And who would you pick out as the key signing?
Matty Pearson. Matty Pearson is the one. Matty Pearson is a proper. I hate to go all proper football man, but he's a proper footballer. He is a very decent Championship defender with plenty of experience. He's decent on the ball. He loves to tackle. He's fine putting a winger into the front row. He has covered at right back. He's played as a defensive midfielder. He will be extremely vocal. He will effectively be your leader from the back there in a way that Town haven't had for a long time, because the thing about Jonathan Hogg is, as good as he is, his leadership is by, not necessarily by encouragement, shall we say. And you pick up on that even more when, like as me and Steve have, you've been doing games behind closed doors, because obviously you can see and hear everything. Pearson is a proper up and at 'em, come on lads, out, let's do this, still 0-0 type defender. And I think his signing is a very, very good one. And I think the way they've refreshed that defence, so they've actually got some quality cover, or cover they trust, I should say, for Pippa and Toffolo, I think is key. I think having Pearson next to Zaar will be a good thing, because Sarr played his best football when he had that sort of defender in Richard Keogh next to him.
Well, if it's Sarr that plays, because
but I look at the way he's stacking it, and I think with Colwell, I think as good as he is, I think he comes in when Town move to a 3 at the back. I don't think they'll play a defensive 3 at the back necessarily next season. I think they might do it England style, where it's quite containing, but you have one of the defenders, specifically Colwell, I suspect, actually carrying the ball into midfield or playing that early pass. And one of the things that has driven me and Steve mad for 2 years of watching Town is goalkeeper to central defender to defensive midfielder, defensive midfielder turns and then either plays a forward pass or turns around and plays it back to central defender, who plays it back to defensive midfielder. And the impetus is gone, the momentum's gone. And I think doing the Maguire Stones thing of giving your defenders license to step out, I've just written on it today, actually, I think could be a huge weapon for Town this season.
You're a huge weapon for Town. We sort of saw that a bit last year. Like the early performances, we did see a bit of the overlapping centre backs thing, and then it just sort of disappeared. They stopped doing it fairly soon in the season, because I think they realised they just didn't have the personnel to do it.
Do you remember Danny Cowley, when we noticed very, very early on that it was goalkeepers to Schindler, and then Schindler to hit that diagonal, not necessarily looking for a man, but just trying to hit the space every time to get them on the front foot and get them going early. It's a very viable tactic for Town, particularly when you got someone like Josh Karoma, who, if you get him one-on-one with a defender anywhere near goal, and you really fancy him to score, don't you? So it's something they need to work on.
Yeah, I think the thing with the defence, I think that's where you have the most encouragement. Like I don't know if I'd single out one signing yet, because everyone they've brought in is either unproven at this level, or it's Jordan Rhodes, who has had sort of 4.5 bad years, or it's Levi Colwell, who's has never played senior football before. I think Pearson is, you're right, the one who is, you would look at and say, yeah, he's a really good Championship signing. And but I think what they have now in defence is they have variety, because before you had a load of centre-backs last year who all had quite similar qualities, like Schindler, Elphick. And I know that these weren't all fit at the same time, but Schindler, Elphick, Stearman, Keogh, they were all sort of
the same player.
Yeah, they're good. They're good man to man. They're good in the air, but you can catch them on the counter quite easily. And I think they have a lot more variety now with Colwell, who looks an absolute unit, but also has a bit of class on the ball, as you'd expect from Chelsea. You got Rahmani Edmonds-Green, who played, had a good run in the side last year and lost his place to Keogh, probably a bit harshly. And I expect Rahmani will play quite a bit this year. I almost wonder, this is the thing, is I don't know who that centre-back pairing is going to be. You've put forward Sarr as an option. I think it's going to be Colwell. And you've put forward Pearson as a starter, and I think it's going to be Edmonds-Green. So I think
I would be staggered if it's not Sarr and Pearson, just for the fact that, for all his faults, and there will be people watching this who I know whose eyes cannot roll far back enough in their head, but Sarr played more minutes than any outfield player it wasn't even close last season. It wasn't even close.
Back of the next closest, probably, I imagine.
Yeah, but a way off. And Pearson, he's just too good, Steve. He really is he should have been playing higher up than Luton, to be frank, anyway. Mm-hmm. It's just one of those players who's genuinely gone under the radar a bit. His numbers are great. He passes the eye test every time you see him. So I think you start with Pearson and Sarr, but then you're right. You've got Edmonds-Green and Colwell to bring in if you want to do a 3. The minute Sarr starts doing Sarr things, you can pull him out and give Colwell a run there in a 2. But I predict that I think he wants to play with a 3 at the back sometimes, but I don't think you're going to see the restrictive control the space, control the lines 3 at the back he was playing last year, when he was just desperately trying to claw this team over the line. I think you're going to see a 3 at the back, as I said, that's a little bit more Southgate style, in that one of your defenders actually becomes your first point of creation, and you allow your midfield to be in midfield, and you allow your forwards to be your forwards. So yeah, it's the variety though, isn't it, Steve? Because that was that I think, for all the points I've made about the squad earlier, the one thing I would say is Town had the same player in a few different positions last year, in truth.
And now, even at fullback, they've got, Turton is almost the opposite of Pippa in terms of style of play. He's much more of a sensible player, and I think there are occasions when you need that. And Ruffles is the one who, when I did the scouting, it was like he could be really interesting. The Oxford fans have said, basically with Ruffles, he was a central midfielder and just a fairly average so-so play. If he was dropped, he wouldn't bat an eyelid kind of midfielder. And then he moved to left back a few years ago, and he's absolutely thrived in that role. He's been one of the best left backs in League One for the last 2 or 3 seasons, and his numbers are incredible when you look at the number of chances he creates, his crossing stats. He creates a lot more out of far fewer crosses than most fullbacks, and he scores a lot of headers, which could be really important from set pieces. But Oxford fans have sort of questioned his one-on-one defending sometimes, which I think probably is sort of the fact that he's not, didn't come through as a defender, come into the fold. But I think you can mitigate that if your centre backs are up to it. And as I say, they've just got variety and options there now. How good they're going to be is sort of the question mark, as I say, because you've got, I think Pearson is very proven, but Turton has played most of his career at League One level. Same with Ruffles. Colwell never played senior football before. Rhodes has been poor for 4.5 years, and Nichols, obviously, we expect will probably start as the second choice goalkeeper. So I think they are still missing that one more quality signing. I do think, not to bang on about it, I find it hard to believe that Chelsea would send Colwell out if they weren't expecting him to play regularly, to be honest, but we'll see how that goes. And 3 at the back could well be a viable option. I quite like the idea of a 3 of Rahmani, Edmonds-Green, Matty Pearson and Levi Colwell. I think that sounds pretty good, to be fair. But it's midfield and on the wing at the time of recording that you've got the issues. They haven't found that Carolighton replacement. They haven't, I think we've not seen Isaac and Benza in pre-season yet. We're not seeing, Rolando Aaron has been injured. Danny Grant's been injured. Aaron Rowe is still very inconsistent. Josh Caroma is obviously nailed on for the left wing. Sorba Thomas, I think, has looked really good basically since he arrived. He seems to have exactly the right attitude, and he did well against Southport as well. But again, it's experience.
I think the thing about Sorba Thomas is I think he's the player I'm really looking at this season, because I really like, me and you have seen him before games down there, and whether he's playing or not, he's always there. He's always talking to coaches. He's always watching warm-ups. He's always trying to learn. I think his attitude is right.
Mm-hmm.
He warms up with intent rather than, well, I'm just going to say it, rather than Alex Pritchard. I think he could do well. My problem with Thomas is I think he's far better on the left than he is on the right, and he's got an immovable object in his way. Karoma isn't going anywhere. So I think you've seen in pre-season, he played, I think, right-hand side against Harrogate. And then, interestingly, it was the game against Southport where he started on the left, and I thought he did really, really well, and he linked up with Toff really, really well as well, and O'Brien on that side. Then they switched him right, but he wasn't playing as a right winger. He was almost doing that Pippa false 10 thing. He was coming so central to get involved and get on the ball that I thought that was pretty interesting, because I think there's obviously a bit of a longer term plan there. But the other thing I'd say about Storber Thomas was his set piece delivery was really good, really good against Southport. And if you're going to lose Mbenza, you need somebody else in this team who can take a set piece, because that's been something Town have been rotten at, absolutely rotten at. And if they can train Thomas up just on set pieces alone, that would be massive, because Colwell's 6'3", Pearson's 6'2" and about 4 foot wide. Sarr is as big as a floodlight. You want to find these people. Because that's 8 or 9 goals for the season found.
Yeah. And I think that I spoke to Dwayne Holmes after the Southport game, and I talked about, you were coming in central a lot more, and he said that was sort of an instruction. So I think they're almost going back to sort of the foundational principles of Carlos ball that we saw nearly 12 months ago now, where it was, 2 proper inverted wingers, and it didn't matter that Dwayne Holmes is a right footer playing on the right in that game. They wanted him driving inside. You had, a left-footed, left-sided centre-back. You had a right-footed, right-sided centre-back. You had fullbacks providing the width. I thought it was interesting that Lewis O'Brien floated across to the right a lot, where we've seen him sticking to the left byline in certain games and linking up with Toffolo. He was drifting left, right, centre, but mostly sort of going out to that right-hand side. And we saw that he liked to have his big creator, Carol Lighton, playing on that right-hand side last year as well. So I think he wants to almost concentrate. I think last year they created a lot of overloads up the wing, and this might be reading too much into a single friendly against non-league opposition, but it feels like they want to try and concentrate on creating those overloads in the middle instead, to try and create more space for Karoma and for Rhodes. It'll be interesting. But I think the best signing, I think it depends whether Colwell or Pearson or both are going to start. I think it's going to be one of those two. But almost as a cop-out answer, I think almost maybe the best signing hasn't been made yet. And I think they obviously need to raise some money to do that. They've been very transparent about that fact. They've said since the very start of the summer that they need to sell players before they can bring more quality in. They made an exception for Levi Colwell because they felt that he was basically just too good to pass up.
There's about 9 clubs in for him. Wasn't there?
Exactly. So they checked down the back of the sofa and scraped the pennies out of the car and all of that kind of thing, and managed to get him through the door. But that does suggest that they really can't afford to do that again. So it'll be interesting to see, if they can sell someone, who they sell. Obviously, there are some players they would rather sell than others, but whoever it is going to have an asking price on them. And, even if it's Mbenza or Bacuna, who I think obviously they've been fairly open about the fact that they've extended their contract with a view to selling them, they will still have prices that need to be met. I don't know. I think obviously, the elephant in the room, as ever, when we're talking about finances, is the repayments that are going to Dean Hoyle. It is a substantial amount that is being paid out to him. And I think they have to make sure that they're able to pay that, and they're able to pay any other outstanding transfer fees they might owe from previous years. They've got a lot of things to weigh up, and they need to make sure the finances are right because, I think they've been, again, quite open about the fact they need to be self-sustainable. They want to be a self-sustainable club. They want to get their net down to zero, and you don't do that by racking up more debt. So we'll just have to see how it goes with the rest of the window, really, and whether they can get a player out and whether they can get players in. But I think they desperately need a creative midfielder, and I think they could do with a proper out-and-out first-choice right winger as well.
Okay, we'll maybe speed this up a little bit as well. Otherwise, this might be an hour and a half in the making this. How do you see the season playing out for Huddersfield this year? We'll do some predictions shortly, but in terms of, last year we could see what would happen, and if injuries befell, then we were going to struggle. But how do you potentially see this season going for Huddersfield? And walk us through what you think will happen, and then we'll come on to predictions specifically.
I think it's hard to say when you've got so many new signings in, and again, there's all those question marks over them. But you would hope that they would be better than last year. I think that is obviously the hope, is to try and have. I don't think they're expecting to go and sort of challenge for the top six this season, but I think they want to have a season where their form from the first half of last season stretches over a whole season, and by the end of the season they are getting the results more consistently, and those teething problems are gone. And you would hope that there would be fewer teething problems this year than last year, because they've already got a core of players there that are used to Corberan's style. They're used to the demands of Corberan's football. They're used to his training. That they know what he wants. They know what they're doing. They know what the roles are. That's the hope. It's whether they've got the players to deliver on it, because we know that this style can work in the Championship, but it's ultimately down to the players to deliver it.
I think the evidence I've seen from Carlos Corberan is that I was talking to the Housewife's Choice Jim Chisholm earlier, and the extremes thing with Corberan, I think, is a very real thing when you look at last season. And what I would hope is that there's an awful lot more of the average next season. There's an awful lot more of a 2-0 win on a Tuesday night to just pick up those average wins. What I honestly think might happen is I think it could be one way or the other again. It would not surprise me if come Christmas it's all clicked and Corberan has learned from this first season and he's got players that fit his system better, particularly if they get that quality central midfielder in. And Town are in the top 10 and are looking good and scoring goals, particularly if Rhodes gets going early. I'm not as down on the Rhodes signing as some. I think there is a world where he turns out to be a decent signing for Town next season. But then if that doesn't happen, then I think Town could be struggling. I think they could be in that sort of bottom six mix again, and with all the same problems to do with creativity and not scoring goals. I've just not seen anything from Corberan yet to suggest that nice, steady transitional path into mid-table, very little drama. Me and Steve can get the season wrapped up on podcasts and in print and on the website, a month before the end. I've just not seen any evidence that that's the way it's going to be, unfortunately. I hope it is, because that's exactly what the club needs. If going up would be a disaster, going down would be a disaster. What this club really could do with is a couple of seasons of just very steady mid-table. We'll take that, thank you very much. Beat your biggest rival, lose a few here and there, football.
Okay, we'll go on to a top six prediction. I don't think many people are going to predict Town to be up here, but who are you looking at to finish in the top two, round up your four for the playoffs, and to pick a playoff winner?
Shall I go?
Yeah, man.
I'm easy.
I've heard that. Yeah, I think Sheffield United look good, and this is a bit of bias because I have written a bit about Sheffield United this summer here and there. All of us on Yorkshire Live cover for each other now and then for holidays and days off and things like that. And I have done a bit on Sheffield United, but I think they're either going to do what Town did when they got relegated and end up really struggling, or they're going to do what I suspect they're going to do and they're going to look really good. I think getting Jukanovic in early in the summer was a great move. On our podcast, Due to Be a Terrier, when you asked me a couple of years ago, Dave, who do I want to replace Jan Siva, I said to the VC Jukanovic. I think he's a really good manager. He knows how to get at this level. He knows how to get out of this division, and they've got a good core of players there. And the other one is kind of a boring answer, but I think you can't look past Fulham again. That they're always going to be up there. They've got they weirdly, because they had so many players on loan last year, they've not had to sell a load of players, so they've lost a lot of players, but they've also not gone and done what they did last time and spent a load of money that they couldn't really afford to spend on a load of attackers and not buy a defence. They have bought Terence Congola now, and he's obviously going to solve all of their problems. So yeah, I think it's hard to look past those two. Unfortunately, we're in an era now where every promotion relegation now you're looking at, well, who's between the Premier League and the Championship, it's, well, who's just gone up, who's just come down. They'll probably go back the other way.
I think I think it's very difficult to pick out 4 teams, and boringly enough, it's Fulham, who I think have got a decent manager, but have got their first team and their squad as is. It's pretty frightening for Championship opponents. Sheffield United, who I'm a bit like you, Steve. I think they're either going to be right up there, or they're going to have a massive Premier League hangover.
Yeah.
I think Bournemouth, I'm not as down on Scott Parker as some. A lot of people have said, he'll get shown up and what have you. They've still got an excellent squad. Bournemouth have got so many goals in them. And Parker is an attacking manager by nature. That's what he wants to do. So I think they could be well up there. And then West Brom, who haven't been mentioned yet, but have also got a very, very good Championship squad and first team at the moment. It's boring because we're predicting 3 of the teams that have been relegated to be 3 of the 4 teams that will be in the top 4, or I am anyway. But it's just a very difficult league to get out of now in the Championship because of that. Because you have a club like Fulham who can afford to get relegated, and they can afford to keep their wage bill absolutely sky high, and they can afford to keep players who are internationals and they're not even making their subs bench, etc., for at least one season to try and have a go at getting back. And that, when you're sort of not even a Huddersfield Town, but when you a Nottingham Forest or a I don't know, or a Cardiff Swansea, or someone like that, or a Swansea, you feel like you're basically playing an entire season to try and finish 5th or 6th.
Yeah.
But that's just how the league is at the minute.
Okay, so just recap there, Stephen. Who's your top 6? Just off you go.
Yeah, so for my top 6, I got Sheffield United, Fulham, West Brom, Swansea. I think will be up there again. How many have I just said?
I couldn't disagree with you more on Swansea. I think the wheels are going to come off there big time.
Lovely. Bournemouth, I think I agree, are going to be up there again. And then you're honestly guessing. I think QPR looked really good in the second half of last season, didn't they? At various points. So who knows with them?
I've basically got the same 5. And if I had to stick my neck on the line, that I personally think Fulham will probably win it. If it's not Fulham, I think Bournemouth rather than Sheffield United actually will win it. But for me, the six of them, I think I'm actually going to go Stoke, who are starting, have sort of over the last couple of windows shed a lot of fat from that squad. They're on a mini rebuild. They've got a very good manager who I rate very, very highly. And I just feel it's time for them to have a bit of a run at it again, if I'm honest.
And a dark horse. There's always room for a Huddersfield 2017 or a Barnsley last season. Anyone stand out where you think? Do you know
I'm going to leap in here before Steve steals my answer because he knows what my answer is. Luton are an incredibly well-run club who make extremely sensible decisions on recruitment and on other various appointments within their club. They have a very good manager who is very progressive, and he's very, very good with his squad in terms of you're looking at a manager there who gets every last drop out of his sort of core of 6 or 7 people in the first team. And I think they've recruited well, and I think they've got goals in them, which is the thing that has let them down slightly before. But I think if you look over the last couple of seasons, promotion, and they stayed in the league, then they've improved on their results year on year. And I'm not saying they're going to get into the playoffs and be, I don't know if there will be a dark horse, but Luton are the team I look at and think, yeah, you just can't underestimate them on any level anymore.
That's interestingly my pick as well, Dave.
There you go. Yeah, I would have said Luton as well, but since you two have, I'll say someone a bit different. I think Bristol City have been underachieving for a very long time, and Nigel Pearson is a funny manager. He seems to
He's a proper manager, isn't he? That's the thing. He's very easy to dislike him for all sorts of reasons, but I mean, he's better than Bristol City, isn't he? That's the thing.
Probably. And I think Bristol City for a long time have been a team that has recruited well. Generally, they've had a lot of good players through the door there. They've got, they're in a big city. Bristol is a big city. I know they're a 2-club city, but they've got everything they need basically, but they've never quite been able to do it. And they had another disappointing year last year. They obviously, made the managerial change, and I think it depends with Pearson. I think some of his recruitment looks a bit strange, to be honest. Signing likes of Danny Simpson, it's a bit odd, but I suspect they're there more for the behind the scenes things than anything else. So, although Town fans will obviously laugh at that with Danny Simpson. So yeah, Bristol City.
When you said it was a big city, did somebody get lost when they went to the Bristol City away game last year?
No,
Steve?
It was fine. It was fine.
Were you a bit frightened?
Yeah. Oh, it was confusing. No, Bristol was a lovely away trip last year, actually. Very friendly club.
And turning the table on its head, the bottom 3, and there were some. I think everybody predicted the bottom 3 last year. This season doesn't look as easy.
No, I think it's a stronger division than it was last year. I think last year at the bottom, it was that was the worst championship I've known. I think Derby are doomed for me. I think they've got so much to do on and off the pitch to turn themselves around. They only just escaped by the skin of their teeth last year, and I just haven't seen anything to suggest that they're going to make a better go at it this time around, to be honest. But I find it difficult to predict after that. I think Hull are better than people think now. I think they've had their worst days behind them now. Peterborough are that they're again a very up and down, real yo-yo team up and down the EFL. But I think Darren Ferguson generally does well when he's there. Blackpool obviously have only gone up by the playoffs though, and they had a lot of recruitment to do this summer, and I think they might struggle. And Birmingham, I think again I think Lee Bowyer, as much as again similar to Pearson, as much as you may not like him personally, he's obviously a very good manager. I think his record shows that. And I think they might struggle. But despite that, I think Birmingham might struggle again this year.
It is difficult to call this year. I think Wayne Rooney's gone in probably the day after the transfer window's ended, and Derby are in dire straits. So I think they could go. Blackpool seem to be losing the players who got them up in the first place, as well as needing to recruit on top of that anyway. It feels like it's going to be a difficult season for them. I think on top of that, I'm completely the other way to Steve on Swansea. I think they've lost Cooper today. I think the club is a little bit of a mess financially on a few levels. I think they're going to lose a couple of big players as well. I don't think they're going to be able to get a manager in of Cooper's quality. I think the wheels are going to come off there, but I don't think they'll be relegated. I just think they'll be in that bottom six shake-up for a good chunk of the season. So back them for promotion if my predictions are anything to go by. But in terms of a third club, I think it's difficult. I think this season there might be one or two get hit with financial penalties and points penalties, because I think that the long-term effects of COVID on football are still being played out a little bit, and some of the finances in the Championship are absolutely nuts. And there are a lot of clubs who, when you look into it, are being investigated for various things. And it wouldn't surprise me if a sanction decides the third relegation candidate, to be honest with you. If not, Peterborough.
And moving on to Huddersfield. So we usually do on our podcast, we'll do a prediction for Town's Player of the Year, who'll win the Player of the Year, and a prediction for the breakout player from the B team. So last year we all predicted, who did we predict last year to come through the B team? Matty Daly. I think some people predicted Matty Daly. Didn't quite happen. So somebody who's kind of on the periphery, who's ready to shoot through and stake a claim, like Josh Koroma did last year, and Aaron Rowe to a point.
Sorry, do you want a star player and a breakout player, or just a breakout player? Okay. Well, star player, I think, is going to be Josh Koroma. He was the breakout player last year, and I think Matt's got the conch there. I think Koroma is clearly a star on the rise at this point. And if they hold on to him through the window, as I think we probably expect they will, I was really worried when he came back from the injury, and I actually wrote a piece preemptively saying, don't put everything on Josh Koroma's shoulders. It might take a while to get bedded back in, and he just came back and was just brilliant again. Didn't need any adaptation at all. So for a breakout player, I think it's almost hard at this point to say what qualifies as a breakout player, because so many of them, likes of Barmani, Edmonds Green, have already made first team appearances, and some of them have made substantial numbers. But this might be jumping the gun massively. I might end up with egg on my chicken face here, but I think Brahima Diarra could well be the one. I wrote in the pre-season preview that we've done, the print special, which you can order, you'll have seen it advertised on the site, and just by paying P&P. And I wrote in that you might see Brahima Diarra in the second half of next season, when if Town are in a safe position and they can afford to throw a few youngsters on, you might see him then. I think he might be, from what we've seen of the clips and the way he's talked about at the club, and from having seen him play fleetingly just twice at Bournemouth and Southport, he didn't look out of place at all. He's 18 years old, and I think if you've got such high hopes for a player, why not give him a go in the first team if you can find a place for him? He's got that X factor that we've talked about them missing in midfield. He has that bit of something different. You can tell that players hate defending against him, and he could be worth a look.
I think in terms of breakout first, I think one of the things that's quite interesting about Town's recruitment and how they're going to set up the squad this time is that I don't think the fans are going to get what they want, which is this big squad with two players for every position. I think the squad, if anything, is going to be a bit tighter than last year, but I think the quality level is better throughout. And I think the breakout players have got a far harder job this time. I think last season I predicted the same player for breakout and starman, and that was Tommy Elphick. And I think history proved me right on that. This time, I would say my breakout, I've already mentioned him, but I think Sorba Thomas, who I know he's already had some first team football, but it's been very much cameos and being played on the left, being played on the right, being played at right back at one point. We played at left back at one point in different stages of different games. I think Sorba Thomas at some point is going to get a proper run in the first team, and I think there's a talent there. I do think there's a talent there. And star player, it's tough to look past Josh Koroma. I can't believe you're going to ask anyone this, Matt, who isn't going to say Josh Koroma. But I part of me feels, not as a cop-out, but part of me feels that if they get that creative central midfielder in that they need, if he's of a certain quality, you could be looking at your star player there, because that's a position that Town haven't had anybody in since they lost Aaron Moy, and that's the position that nearly every single time Town have flattered to deceive or not played very, very well, me and Steve have always gone back to and said, well, yeah, they've got nobody loading the gun for anybody. They've got nobody playing the ball quick enough. They've got nobody helping the defence out with their transitions. They're slowing it down all the time. They've got nobody who's capable of playing in central midfield, but also dropping into that number 10 role that I know Carlos doesn't play with the number 10, but he loves somebody in that 10 space.
Yeah, how many times did we see Aitin on the edge of the box? I mean, it's what Buchan should have been doing and just didn't do often enough.
Yeah.
And anyway, I'm not going to go another Buchan rant.
So it's difficult, but, and as I said, a slight cop-out. Everyone's going to say Koroma, but it might be that midfielder once they finally get them over the line, or we hope they get them over the line.
It depends who stays.
Bring him home.
It depends who stays as well. Like if Lewis O'Brien somehow manages to stay at the club, we saw the second half of last season, he was like the improvement in the attack. We knew what he could do defensively, but the improvement in the attacking side of his game in the second half of last season, I thought was there.
It's just hand on heart. I can't see him getting to the end of deadline day without there being a bid that Town can't refuse.
Yeah,
that's the problem. I'd love him to be there. I mean, I was fortunate enough to do half his season at Bradford, so I've done an awful lot of Lewis O'Brien, and I'd like to do an awful lot more. I just don't think I will, unfortunately.
Nothing fortunate about that, Dave, I'm afraid. But I think that will wrap up those predictions quite nicely there. So thanks, Stephen. Thanks, Dave. All the best going forward this season with the Examiner and obviously the podcast, which we all listen to. And all
same
enjoy.
to you, minus the Examiner bit.
Listen to a howling roar. Metal under tension, begging you to touch and go. Highway to the danger zone. Right into the danger zone. Heading into twilight, spreading out her wings tonight. She got you jumping off the deck and shoving into overdrive. Highway to the danger zone. I'll take you right